The 911 operator just received a suspicious call from a woman. Despite barely being able to breathe and in danger, she still tried to provide crucial information to the operator. When the police arrived at the address she provided, they found nobody inside but discovered a large bloodstain on the carpet and an empty handgun box. Then, 911 received another call, this time from a man saying his wife, Teri Jendusa, had gone missing. But she wasn't the only one. Their 2 daughters had also disappeared without a trace. What happened to the woman and her children? In 1996, in Wynn Lake, Wilkinson State, USA, Teri Jendusa married David Larson and had a happy life. In the years that followed, their family welcomed 2 daughters, Amanda and Holly. However, Teri soon realized that David was not the good, gentle man he seemed to be. He was controlling over his wife and often quarreled with her. He had a violent side and even physically assaulted Teri several times. Whenever David flew into a rage, he always tried to make Teri believe it was all her fault. Consequently, Teri was always worried about her actions and tried her best to please him. Unfortunately, even the slightest thing could anger him. Teri endured David's abuse, striving to change the way he treated her. But as soon as he showed himself to be a danger to the children, Teri realized he was a problem. Determined to protect her children, she sought to end the marriage. Their divorce was finalized on January 31, 2001. Despite David's history of abusing Teri and her efforts to escape from this violent man, the judge decided to grant both her and David joint custody. However, she still had to allow him to see Amanda and Holly. Though Teri had escaped after years of abuse, the danger was still present. She worried for her children every time she had to take them to visit their father. David's threats continuously haunted her, making it difficult to trust someone again. It wasn't until more than a year later that Teri found comfort and support in meeting Nick Nikolai, and she began to open her heart again. They dated, and Nick showed her the love she deserved. Together, they built a very happy family, and Nick also loved the children as if they were his own. In 2003, Teri and Nick got married, a time that should have been filled with joy. Yet, Teri soon realized her ex-husband David was not ready for it. David threatened Teri, saying she would regret marrying him. On January 31, 2004, Teri went to pick up her children, 4-year-old Holly and 6-year-old Amanda, after they had visited David. Nick offered to accompany her, but Teri wanted to go alone, fearing that bringing Nick might worsen the situation due to David's temperamental nature. Despite the prospect of meeting her abusive ex-husband, Teri remained upbeat, excited to pick up her daughters and share some big news with them. The couple had found out the night before that Teri was pregnant, and they were eager to tell the children that they were going to have a new sibling. It was 10 a.m. when she arrived at David's house and knocked on the door. He said the children were playing inside. Hearing David's voice sounded better than usual, Teri confidently stepped in. However, when she couldn't see her daughters, she felt something was wrong. She was hit on the head from behind and fell face down on the living room floor. Teri's body felt paralyzed, and before she could react, David wrapped duct tape around her. But then, Teri's maternal instincts kicked in. Worried for her children's safety, she tried to fight back. Unfortunately, due to significant blood loss, Teri quickly became weak and couldn't escape. David then threw her into a trash bin, sealed it with duct tape, and placed it in the back of his truck. Once out of David's sight, Teri tried to figure out what she could do. She realized she still had her phone with her. So, she reached into her pocket, felt for the numbers, and dialed 911. The 911 operator was initially skeptical, thinking it might be a prank call. But when Teri managed to gasp for breath and mention her ex-husband's name and address, they immediately realized the severity of the situation. Afterward, she managed to call her husband Nick. Hearing his wife was in danger, Nick quickly said goodbye and called the police. He also informed the police that besides Teri, their 2 children were missing, and Teri was pregnant. While the police were on their way to David Larson's house, Teri was locked in a trash bin on the back of his truck. If he drove into a nearby forest, it was certain the police might never find Teri. She tried to reach out her hand and wave frantically, hoping someone passing by would see her. However, before anyone noticed, David saw her through the rearview mirror and quickly stopped the truck. He stepped out and returned to where Teri was, warning her not to resist or he would kill her. Then, he intended to return to the truck, but Teri's phone suddenly rang. He heard it and immediately snatched it from her hand. He continued to drive, and Teri clung to a final hope of waiting for the police. A while later, Teri suddenly heard the sound of police sirens approaching them. She thought this would be the end, but unexpectedly, the sound of the police sirens faded away, and they gently passed by. The police had no idea they had just driven past the woman who had called them. At that moment, Teri felt completely helpless. She didn't know what David intended to do with her and her children. When the police entered the house, they found no one inside but saw numerous photos of her with David from their wedding. They also found an empty handgun box, a woman's tracksuit with tape wrapped around it stained with a substance resembling blood. There was more blood inside the house, and the investigators knew Teri and her children were in danger. Initially, the police could call David's phone in Milwaukee, about half an hour away from his house in Wynn Lake, but then the signal suddenly disappeared. They also found a note at the house indicating David owned properties in Milwaukee at 3 different addresses, so they carefully checked each one. The investigators found Teri's car near David's house. Therefore, they quickly inspected it, hoping to find evidence inside that could point them in the right direction. However, despite thoroughly searching everything in the car, the police found no sign of Teri or the children. All 3 properties he owned in Milwaukee also had no clues, and everything gradually reached a deadlock. Back in David's truck, all Teri could think about was what her ex-husband would do to their children. Suddenly, the vehicle stopped, and she heard her daughter's voices outside. They seemed to be playing and laughing joyously. However, she couldn't call out because she knew they were too young to do anything and it would make them vulnerable. Even as death seemed imminent, Teri wanted to do everything possible to protect them. She didn't know where David had taken her, but then he set the trash bin down, started stacking items on top, and closed it up. Everything became quiet, and Teri heard David's truck driving away. He had taken the children and left her alone there. After waiting a few minutes to ensure he had left, she started screaming for help and trying to escape. She managed to create a small hole in the lid for some air, but her injuries caused her to quickly exhaust. It seemed she was locked in a storage facility. Meanwhile, the police were searching for any clue to quickly rescue her. Finally, shocking information emerged when it was discovered David went to work as usual in Wheeling, Illinois, and was driving a green truck similar to the one the police were looking for. They quickly surrounded him and took him in for questioning. However, when questioned, David told the police he was shocked to hear that Teri was missing and that he would do anything to help find her. Initially, investigators pretended to believe him to make him think they were on his side. David claimed that Teri never came to pick up the children even though he had stayed home all morning waiting for her. However, detectives knew David had left the house in the morning through phone tracking and found Teri's car near his house. After hearing David's blatant lies, the police said, "David, you couldn't have been at home at 11:30 a.m. today because we were there at 11:03, and we didn't see you." David started to worry. Moreover, the police found Teri's blood on his jeans. Suddenly, David changed his story. He admitted that Teri had come to his house that morning, but he was busy preparing the children's homework and didn't notice when Teri entered the house. As the pressure mounted, David's lies became more absurd. He went around in circles, saying, "I turned around and saw Teri standing behind me with a hammer and her pants pulled up to her calves. Then she attacked me unexpectedly, so I had to defend myself. I grabbed a baseball bat and hit Teri." After hours of interrogation, he did not reveal anything that could help them in the search. Meanwhile, Teri's situation was getting worse. She was still stuck in the trash bin in the cold weather. Her body temperature was dropping rapidly, causing her limbs to freeze. She tried everything to keep herself awake and wait for help. At the same time, the police were racing to find the whereabouts of the 3 missing persons. They continuously urged David to provide answers about the location of his ex-wife and daughters. Eventually, David disclosed the whereabouts of the children. Following the clue, the police approached the house and found the 2 daughters safe. but they were unaware that their mother was being held captive by their father. They hadn't even seen their mother that day. Although David revealed where the children were, he still did not disclose where Teri was being held. Investigators confiscated his personal items, including his wallet and clothes, and discovered a business card in his wallet. They called every number on it but couldn't get through. Finally, upon further investigation, they were lucky to find a clue: a card for a storage rental in Wheeling, Illinois. Indeed, when the police called to check if David Larson had a storage unit there, they confirmed, yes, he does. When was the last time he was here? He came here yesterday. From there, the police knew where he had taken Teri. They quickly went to the storage unit. Upon arrival, they entered and saw many boxes and plastic containers on the floor. They noticed a trash bin that stood out the most, with its lid sealed shut and what appeared to be a stain resembling dried blood. Meanwhile, Teri was dazed and unsure how much longer she could last when suddenly she heard a noise from outside. She was terrified, wondering if David had returned to kill her. Then she tried to remain calm, making no noise, hoping he would think she had died. But she heard a voice that wasn't David's. "Teri, we are the police. If you are in there, give us a signal so we can rescue you." At that moment, Teri used all her strength to shake the bin. When the police removed the tape and opened the lid, they found a poor woman lying curled up with a large wound on her head. Her eyes were swollen shut, her face swollen and pale, looking very pitiful. Despite being beaten, tied up, and left to die in a trash bin in freezing temperatures, miraculously, she was still alive and was taken to the hospital for treatment. David had beaten her with a baseball bat and left her in the snow for up to 27 hours. Moreover, Teri faced a tremendous loss. She had a miscarriage, and doctors had to amputate all her toes and fingers as they had completely frozen. They even said if the police had arrived an hour later, Teri might have died. But what mattered most was that she was still alive and could see her husband and children again. After a period of recovery, Teri went to court to face David once more and recounted the horrific pain. Eventually, David Larson received a life sentence, and Teri's family was safe. At the sentencing, he glared at Teri once more. She is now enjoying life with her family and even welcomed a son with Nick. Through this story, we admire Teri's determination and will. She fought against all odds and never gave up. Teri once said, "When you go through something that pushes you to the brink like it did me, it definitely gives you a new perspective and a whole new strength."